Okay, welcome everybody to Chassidus in the morning, 15 minutes to change your life. Learning the Kuntres Heichaltzu. Tracking away. Okay, so we ended off yesterday, we finished base Aleph. So basically we're discussing some questions. We're going to discuss some more questions today. And then probably tomorrow we'll start to get into the meat of the Maimer. Really the main discussion of the Maimer, which is about the clip of Midyan, and about Sinas Chinam, and things like this. So essentially we asked a few questions on the story in the Torah that Hashem says to Moshe that you should avenge Ahavas Yisroel, the avenge of the Jewish people of Midyan. And then Moshe comes and tells the Jewish people they should avenge the Nakama of God. Also, what we see here from the story, and that's sort of the question we're going to discuss today. Yesterday, we talked about what's the connection between Midyan and Moshe? That it seems from the Psukim that Hashem says, fight over Midyan, and then you're gonna pass away. So what's the connection? Yeah, and that's essentially what we were discussing. Yeah, and also that through Midyan, through this war, not just Hashem passed away and Moshe passed away, but through this war, it sort of completes his mission, Moshe. Why? How does Midyan, fighting war with Midyan, add so much to Moshe? Just before we start, a quick story that the Klausenberger Rebbe, he was born in in early 1900s, 1901, I think. No, I mean 1908. And unfortunately, he was during the Holocaust. He lost his family, he lost his wife, 11 kids, but he was a strong man. And after the war, he came to Ahavas Yisroel and he built up his community again, a big community, and it became so big they even had their own newspaper. Before it was called the Klausenberg, but it was a monthly newspaper, and it had different things about the community updates, and also had the talks that he would say. So one time, one of the Klausenberg Chassidim got a call from the Rebbe, from the Rebbe's office, asking if the guy knows who's the editor of this newspaper, because the Sikha, the Klausenberg Rebbe says he was a very sharp person. So what he would say was sometimes a little bit rough. So the Rebbe wrote, what the Rebbe was trying to get that what was printed would be not as rough. And the Rebbe said this is meant to be nice and welcoming, not so rough. So yeah, something that we see here again, that's all Indian of Ahavas Yisroel, and even the way we write things, we speak things, and things like that. Now, base. So this chapter continues the theme, page 7. This chapter continues the theme of the first, presenting further questions regarding Hashem's command to Moshe to wage war against Midyan. In this chapter, the Rebbe Rashab also introduces one of the basic Chassidic themes of the moment, that Midyan serves as the counterpart in the realm of evil to God's name Havayah. That's also, we're going to see that. Okay, it is also necessary to understand the fundamental nature of the war against Midyan. So what's this real war with Midyan over here? The principal reason behind it was the children of Israel to exact retribution from the Midianites, rather than to acquire their lands. So when we wage war against Midyan, it wasn't that we were trying to conquer their lands, especially in times of shiur, with different wars, Sichon and Oig, which is what we with Ruvain and Havshei Menashe, that's what they got. Ruvain got and Havshei Menashe, that's what we received. By Midyan, it wasn't a conquering war. For the Torah implies the land of Midyan did not become part of Israel's inheritance. The lands inherited by the tribes of Gad, Reuben, and half of Menashe had belonged to Sichon and Oig. So these lands were also not part of the land originally destined for the Jewish people. We all know that Sichon and Oig weren't part of Eretz Yisrael, but Gad, Reuben, and half of Menashe, they saw it as a good pasture land, and so they asked Moshe. But the Midyan's land wasn't taken. These lands were also not part of the land of Israel. They were conquered by the Jews through wars led by Moshe. However, in contrast to the land of Midyan, these lands became part of the inheritance of Jewish people. But Midyan didn't become part of the inheritance of Jewish people. As Rashi explains on the phrase, Ataris and Divine, 2 places. We're going to go page 8. We're going to skip the Ramban, because basically the Ramban just says that Midyan was also conquered, and we also use their land. But the Rashab says, according to Pshat, it's very difficult to say this. So I don't want to get people confused. But that's the principal reason for this war was retribution. It wasn't to get the land, because we didn't get the land of Midyan. So therefore, it's necessary to understand a seeming contradiction within the narrative itself. When quoting Hashem's words to Moshe, it says, exacting the attribution of the children of Israel. Yet Moshe tells the Yidden to exact the attribution of Hashem from Midyan. So is it that we're exacting the attribution of the Yidden, or exacting the attribution of Hashem? Hashem says to Moshe the attribution of the Yidden, and Moshe tells the Yidden the exact attribution of Hashem. So what's going on over here? Because that's what we have to understand. What's it going to do with the Hashem that Moshe is saying to the Yidden? Because the Midyan didn't only harm the Yidden, as it is written, for they harassed you. That's what Hashem says. That they harassed the Yidden, not Hashem. As a response to this, it says, exact retribution of the children of Israel. Because they harassed us, so we're exacting retribution. That's what Hashem is telling Moshe. But what does this have to do with the attribution of Hashem? And with Hashem's name Havayah. That's what Moshe says. He says, Moshe Amar, he says, let's say Nakamas Havayah Midyan. So what's it connected to Hashem, but more specifically the name of Havayah, which we'll discuss. Havayah refers to the 4-letter name of Hashem, the Yud, the Hey, the Vav, and then the last Hey, as commonly pronounced in the start of Chassidus, Havayah. This name is associated with the godly light that entirely transcends the structure of the world, being past, present, and future as one. So this is that level. And we're sort of exact attribution of that level. Why? True, the Rebbe offers a possible resolution on why the verse speaks of both the attribution of Havayah and the attribution of Jewish people. Now we're going to try to explain why we need both of them. The truth is written, part of Hashem is your people, and he kept them as the apple of his eye. And as I just said, whoever touches them, it is as if he touches the apple of his eye. Meaning, Havayah and the Jewish people, the same thing. For these texts, from these texts, it follows that the attribution of Hashem, of the Yidden is simultaneously the attribution of Hashem. So they're one and the same. So we're sort of trying to answer that it doesn't make a difference who we're talking about. We're talking about the Yidden. It's also we're connected to Hashem. To Hashem, the Yidden. All this is indeed true. However, from the specific wording of the text, exact the attribution of Havayah against Midyan, the implication is that the war against Midyan is intrinsically connected to Hashem's name Havayah. Therefore, the resolution offered above is not necessarily satisfactory, and further explanation necessary, because he's saying that it's attribution of Havayah, and the Rashab is being very specific, not just Havayah meaning God, but it means the level of Havayah, level of God higher than the worlds, and therefore we're being specific here because it's something very specific. And even though the Jewish people and our God were all one and the same, and you heard us, you heard in God, you heard God, you heard us, it's all the same, but we're talking very specific here, and there must be something specific about this level of Havayah. The intent is that Midyan, as well as being an actual nation, is representative of a spiritual force, a power in the realm of evil. From the above verse, it appears that the klippa of Midyan, meaning the evil of Midyan, is the evil counterpart and force opposing God's Havayah. So what we're saying is that this retribution on Midyan is to contrast Midyan and Hashem Havayah. Hashem Havayah is a level of God higher than the nature of the worlds, totally above and beyond the worlds. And on the opposite spectrum is Klippas Midyan, So we're seeing here, and spiritually, that these are the two counting forces. And that's why we can understand that there's the retribution of Havayah specifically, because we're talking about that level and Midyan, the opposite level, and they're trying to fight each other. So when Midyan caused Israel to sin, through the activity and expression of its klippa, i.e. the evil that is its spiritual source, a blemish was brought upon the name of God. Because what did Midyan do? They came and they caused the Jewish people to sin with Baal Peor and with the women. So the war that was retribution is against this klippa. Because this klippa was the reason why it came was to go against this level of Havayah, this high level. So it's a very low level we did in contrast to the high level of Havayah. A blemish was brought up upon the name of God. i.e., there was an obstruction to the revelation of godliness. Concerning this, it is written to exact attribution of Havayah for Midyan. Concerning this level, what they did, how wrong they did, that's why I need this attribution for the level of Havayah. I.e., by taking revenge against them and destroying them, the Jews would rectify that blemish, the blemish that they had caused by what they did, causing Jewish people to sin. So through taking revenge on them, we'd be able to fix up this blemish that happened. So on the surface, this is difficult to understand. How is it that Midyan is the evil counterpart of God's name Havayah? So why Midyan? Out of all things to be a counterpart to the level of Havayah, why Midyan? Because one might think, to the point that the destroying them is called retribution of Havayah. So bad that this is like the retribution of it. So how? Why? So one might think that the 7 Canaanite nations would cause a greater blemish in God's name Havayah. We think Canaan, why? For as is well known, they represent the 7 evil attributes, the antithesis of holiness. So we have, like we say in Tanya, this one to the contrast to that one, you have the Nefesh Elokim, Bahamas. Nefesh has 7 emotions and 7 attributes. Nefesh Bahamas also has these 7. So therefore, it makes sense to say the opposite contrast of the holiness of Havayah. You'd have these 7 Canaanite nations, which represent these 7 attributes that they're totally opposed to holiness. Every entity in this world, but ultimately we're saying no, they're saying it's Midyan. Because every entity in this world is a representation of spiritual reality above. Just as there are 7 emotive qualities in the realm of holiness, corresponding to the 7 midos, there are 7 emotive qualities in the realm of evil. The 7 Canaanite nations are an embodiment of these 7 undesirable qualities. Therefore, there was a need to conquer the land for these 7 nations, and transform them into Eretz Yisrael, thereby including them in the realm of holiness. And that's what happened. So that would make sense to say this is a contrast to Havayah. These are 7 evil attributes from the 7 nations that we've got to refine. We're talking about Midyan, which is not part of these 7. Midyan, however, is not one of the 7 nations. So that when you understand how does Midyan contrast to Shem Havayah. And another matter requiring explanation in the Torah is use of the word Heichaltzu. What does the word Heichaltzu mean? The name is yourselves. Heichaltzu would make more sense. In the third person would have been more appropriate. Why? To explain. Heichaltzu implies all of you. It means we should all take up arms. But when it came to the actual war, what does it say? But since the verse states "am from you," doesn't say "am all of you." It doesn't. Not all the Jewish people went to war against Midyan. It was only 1,000 from each tribe, meaning that the people did not all go out to war. Only 1,000 per tribe, as the Torah subsequently indicates. Which is why the text states "from you," not all of you. From you. It says Heichaltzu, which means gather. All of you gather. Me'itchem, from you. All of you gather from you. From you implies specific amounts, and Heichaltzu implies everyone. So why does it say Heichaltzu? Should say Yeichaltzu. They will gather, meaning the specific people. Part of you rather than all of you. It follows that Yeichaltzu rather than Heichaltzu would have been the preferred term. For the latter refers to the Jewish people as a whole, implying that they all should arm themselves and ardently prepare for this war. The Rashab is explaining that it seemingly would have been more appropriate for the verse to use the term Yeichaltzu, because it implies that soldiers would be selected from amongst the tribes, while Heichaltzu implies that the entire people got to war. But the entire people weren't going out to war, it was only the soldiers. So the language is seemingly, it doesn't really fit. It's another question. And another question we got in the passage, instead of stating 1,000 per tribe, that's what they told Moshe to get 1,000 per tribe, for all the tribes of Israel. Seemingly, the verse should have said, from every tribe. Why did it say 1,000 of tribe for all of Israel, for all the tribes of Israel? Say from every tribe. Now, the Rebbe Rashab quoting this question is posed already from the Alter Rebbe, which focuses on the grammatical construction employed. The Rebbe Rashab does not answer this question explicitly in a Maimer here. If you look in the Torah, where the Alter Rebbe explains that the words lichol mates, to all the countings, indicate that the war was fought as a combined effort from the entire Jewish people. The Alter Rebbe explains that all the Jewish people together are waging this war. But essentially, we have a few more questions. In summary, the intent of the war against Midyan, that it was fought for revenge and not conquest. That was the first point we said, that it wasn't a conquest type of war, it was retribution for what they had done. The opposition of God's name Havayah, and we said that Midyan is the opposite of Havayah. And we discussed that we need to understand this and all these things, because why was it opposite of Havayah? Isn't the 7 Canaanite nations more apropos to be the opposite of Havayah? And the questions in the language of the use in the Torah, which is, it says, Heichaltzu, that's you all should gather, all of you should arm yourselves, whereas really it was only the army. The question in the language used in the Torah, which implies that the war against Midyan was to be fought by the Thai Jewish people, which seemingly wasn't. Yeah, so we have a lot of questions, and tomorrow we're going to start to discuss what is Midyan. Meaning to understand these questions, really we have to understand a deeper point. In B'chal, when we learn Chassidus, it's important to appreciate that people used to learn hemsheichim, like a series of Maimarim, that they would learn it without the beginning paragraph, especially in Samach Vav, the beginning paragraph, not paragraph, a chapter. It's like these questions, and then you go, not understand, to continue with what we said before, and continue going on the continuation of the Hemshech. So don't get lost in these questions. The questions are meant to build your interest, so you can come and learn what's the main vibe that the Rashab is trying to teach us. He wants to teach us a lesson in Ahavas Yisroel. He's connected with Midyan, but tomorrow we're going to start learning what that means. To think about something that practically take away is, again, like we talked about yesterday, how it's important to appreciate what we have important, like we have something important to do, like the story with Moshe, that this whole war was to Moshe. We have to also appreciate they're all part of a collective whole. Like it says, all the Jewish people have together, and this is sort of to my Midyan, that the war, even though the war could be done by the army, but we're all in it together. And you could say sort of like now what's happening in Eretz Yisrael, what happened in Eretz Yisrael, and the repercussions around the world, they were all connected. And I ever said to someone, I read this last week, that what you do, what happens in Israel affects the whole Jewish world, and we see it clearly. But it also implies the other way, what we do affects Jewish people. So we should add in a little bit of Torah, avodah, adding more davening, learning, in mind for the help and the safety of the Jewish people everywhere. Yeah, thank you for joining.